I stood in that sterile conference room watching Victoria Sterling's perfectly manicured finger point directly at my chest. The entire engineering team sat frozen around the mahogany table as she delivered her verdict with theatrical precision. "You're obsolete, Pearl Martinez!" she declared, her voice cutting through the Seattle morning air like broken glass. "Your outdated thinking has held this company back long enough. Hand over your badge immediately." The security guards shifted uncomfortably behind her, their faces showing the same shock rippling through my colleagues. But something unexpected happened in that moment of professional execution. My lips curved into the most genuine smile I had felt in months. "You have exactly 5 minutes," I said calmly, "before the servers I personally own stop processing your transactions." Victoria's laughter rang hollow against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, but I could already see the first flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. 5 years ago, I walked through DataFlow Solutions' front doors carrying nothing but a computer science degree from University of Washington and an unshakable belief that technology could change the world. Robert Chen, the company's founder and CEO, hired me as a junior systems administrator when the company was still operating out of a converted warehouse in Georgetown. Back then, we had 12 employees, two ancient servers humming in a closet, and dreams bigger than our quarterly revenue. Robert became more than my boss during those early years. He was the mentor I never expected to find, a second-generation Chinese American who understood what it meant to prove yourself in an industry that often overlooked people like us. "Pearl," he would say, during our late-night troubleshooting sessions, "never let anyone convince you that being underestimated is a weakness. Sometimes it's your greatest strategic advantage." I built DataFlow's entire infrastructure from the ground up. Every server configuration, every security protocol, every backup system bore my digital fingerprint. When clients called with technical emergencies at 2 in the morning, they asked for me by name. When the company's revenue jumped from 6 figures to 8 figures in 3 years, my systems handled every transaction without a single major failure. But success brought scrutiny and budget pressures that Robert struggled to navigate. 2.5 years ago, during a particularly brutal quarterly review, the board demanded 20% cost reductions across all departments. Robert called me into his office, his usually confident demeanor replaced by the weight of impossible decisions. "Pearl, I need your help with something unconventional," he began, closing his office door. "The board wants to cut IT infrastructure spending, but we both know that would be catastrophic. Is there any way we could outsource server management without compromising security or reliability?" That conversation planted the seed of what would become my secret business venture. I spent 3 sleepless weeks researching every legal angle, consulting with my divorce attorney about business entity structures, and calculating the financial risks. My marriage to David had ended badly 2 years earlier, leaving me with legal bills and a fierce determination to never depend on anyone else for my financial security. I registered Northwest Server Solutions under my maiden name, Pearl Williams, obtaining all necessary business licenses and insurance policies. When I presented the outsourcing proposal to Robert and the board, they saw a qualified vendor offering competitive rates and proven expertise. They had no idea that the woman sitting across from them would be paying herself to manage the systems she had already built. The transition took 6 months of meticulous planning. I gradually migrated DataFlow's operations to servers I purchased and housed in a secure facility in Bellevue. Every component was documented, every process was redundant, and every legal protection was ironclad. My contract with DataFlow specified that Northwest Server Solutions maintained full ownership of all hardware and proprietary configurations while guaranteeing uptime and performance standards that exceeded industry benchmarks. During the day, I continued working as DataFlow's senior systems administrator. During evenings and weekends, I operated as Pearl Williams, CEO of Northwest Server Solutions, managing DataFlow's infrastructure, along with contracts I secured from three smaller tech companies. Diana Foster, my assistant at DataFlow, became my most trusted ally without initially knowing the full extent of my dual identity. Her administrative access allowed her to process invoices and coordinate maintenance schedules, creating a seamless operational facade. Marcus Thompson, DataFlow's head of security, suspected something unusual about my vendor relationships, but respected my technical expertise too much to question my methods. Pearl, I don't know how you always manage to solve problems that stump our consultants, he would joke, but keep doing whatever you're doing. The financial pressure of building my infrastructure while maintaining my day job nearly broke me. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee for months, reinvesting every dollar of profit back into better equipment and facility upgrades. But gradually, Northwest Server Solutions grew into a legitimate business operation. My servers supported not just DataFlow, but regional healthcare networks, manufacturing companies, and financial services firms that demanded the highest levels of security and reliability. Robert never questioned the remarkable efficiency of our outsourced IT services. DataFlow's operational costs dropped, while performance metrics improved across every category. The board celebrated the cost savings while clients praised our responsiveness and stability. I had created a perfect symbiotic relationship between my employer and my business, with both entities thriving under my careful management. But I also knew that my secret could not remain hidden forever. Every month, I updated my documentation and legal preparations, anticipating the day when someone might discover the truth. I had learned from my divorce that preparation and documentation were the only shields against people who wanted to destroy what you had built. Looking back now, I realized that those 3 years of dual existence taught me everything I needed to know about independence, strategic thinking, and the power of controlling critical infrastructure. I had unknowingly prepared myself for the exact confrontation that Victoria Sterling would eventually force upon me. Victoria Sterling arrived at DataFlow Solutions 6 months ago with a resume that read like a corporate warfare manual and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The board introduced her as an interim efficiency consultant, brought in to optimize operations and explore growth opportunities. But from the moment she walked into our Georgetown offices, wearing a $1,500 suit and surveying our workspace like a predator evaluating prey, I knew she represented something dangerous. Her background should have been a warning signal to everyone. Victoria had spent 8 years at Tech Giant Corporation, our industry's most ruthless competitor, climbing from regional sales manager to senior vice president of strategic acquisitions. Tech Giant had built its empire by purchasing smaller companies, stripping their assets, and absorbing their client bases while discarding their employees like used tissues. During her first week, Victoria scheduled individual meetings with every department head, ostensibly to understand our operational landscape and identify optimization opportunities. When my turn came, she spent 45 minutes questioning every aspect of our infrastructure with an intensity that felt more like an interrogation than a consultation. "Tell me about your server architecture, Pearl," she began, her pen poised over a yellow legal pad. "These performance metrics seem unusually strong for a company of this size. Who manages your hardware maintenance contracts?" I provided carefully neutral responses explaining our outsourcing arrangements without revealing my connection to Northwest Server Solutions. But Victoria's questions demonstrated a technical knowledge that surprised me. She understood server configurations, network protocols, and database management with a sophistication that went far beyond typical executive oversight. "Your vendor relationships intrigue me," Victoria continued. "Northwest Server Solutions appears to provide exceptional value. Have you considered bringing these operations in-house to reduce long-term costs?" That question sent a chill through my chest. Victoria was already thinking about ways to eliminate my business relationship with DataFlow, though she didn't yet realize she was talking to the owner of the company she wanted to replace. Over the following weeks, Victoria's true agenda became increasingly apparent. She criticized every system Robert had built, every employee he had hired, and every strategic decision he had made. Her recommendations consistently favored approaches that would benefit tech giant while weakening DataFlow's competitive position. During a staff meeting in late September, Victoria announced her first major recommendation. DataFlow should reduce its research and development spending by 60% and focus exclusively on proven revenue streams. This meant abandoning the innovative projects that had made DataFlow attractive to clients seeking cutting-edge solutions. Innovation is expensive and risky, Victoria explained to the assembled team. Market research shows that clients prefer stability and cost efficiency over experimental features. We should concentrate our resources on perfecting our existing product offerings rather than chasing speculative opportunities. Robert's face went pale as Victoria outlined her vision for DataFlow's future. She was describing a company stripped of everything that made it unique, reduced to a generic service provider that tech giant could easily absorb or eliminate. The board meeting where Victoria orchestrated Robert's removal was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. I wasn't present for the closed-door session, but Diana managed to obtain meeting minutes through her administrative connections. Victoria had prepared a presentation demonstrating how Robert's legacy thinking was preventing DataFlow from achieving its full market potential. She presented financial projections showing how strategic restructuring could increase quarterly profits by 40% within 18 months. Her plan included eliminating what she called redundant personnel, renegotiating all vendor contracts at lower rates, and streamlining operations to focus on high-margin services. What the board members didn't understand was that Victoria's projections were based on DataFlow becoming a hollow shell of its former self. She planned to gut the company's innovative capabilities, fire its most talented employees, and reduce it to a basic service provider that tech giant could purchase at a fraction of its true value. Robert fought against Victoria's recommendations during that final board meeting, arguing that DataFlow's strength came from its people and its commitment to technological excellence. But Victoria had done her homework, identifying each board member's personal financial pressures and presenting her proposals as solutions to their individual concerns. The vote was 5-2 in favor of accepting Robert's resignation and appointing Victoria as interim CEO. Robert cleaned out his office on a gray October afternoon, his 25 years of building DataFlow reduced to 2 cardboard boxes and a folder of personal documents. "Pearl," he said during our goodbye conversation, "I want you to be careful around Victoria. I don't think her intentions align with DataFlow's best interests, and I'm worried about what she might do to the people who built this company." His warning proved prophetic sooner than either of us expected. Within days of becoming CEO, Victoria began implementing changes that destabilized everything Robert had created. She fired 3 senior engineers, claiming their salaries were incompatible with market efficiency. She canceled client projects that were 90% complete, redirecting resources towards simpler contracts with lower profit margins. Most ominously, she began questioning our server management arrangements with increasing aggressiveness. Victoria scheduled meetings with potential replacement vendors seeking quotes for infrastructure services that would cost 3 times what DataFlow currently paid while delivering inferior performance. During a late-night conversation with Diana in early November, I learned the most disturbing piece of information about Victoria's true intentions. Diana had been working late when she overheard Victoria on a conference call with someone she addressed as Jim from corporate development. "The technical infrastructure is more sophisticated than we anticipated," Victoria said during the call. "But once we eliminate the senior administrator who built these systems, we can replace everything with our standard configurations. The transition will take 6 months, but the cost savings will justify the temporary disruption to client services." Diana realized that Victoria wasn't trying to improve DataFlow at all. She was systematically weakening the company to make it an attractive acquisition target for tech giant corporation. And I was the primary obstacle to her plan because my infrastructure knowledge could expose the deliberate sabotage she was orchestrating. That night, I went home to my apartment in Capitol Hill and began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I updated my legal documentation, secured backup copies of all critical files, and activated monitoring systems that would track every action Victoria took against DataFlow's infrastructure. Victoria Sterling had made a critical error in her strategic planning. She had focused so intensely on eliminating threats that she had failed to understand the full scope of what she was threatening. She saw me as an expendable employee who could be easily replaced. She had no idea that she was about to declare war on the person who controlled the very foundation of everything she wanted to destroy. The morning Victoria Sterling decided to destroy my career began with an email sent to the entire engineering department at 7:45 a.m. All technical staff report to conference room A at 9 a.m. for a mandatory strategy session. Attendance is required and non-negotiable. The message's tone carried the bureaucratic coldness that had become Victoria's signature since taking control of DataFlow. I arrived at the conference room to find chairs arranged in a semicircle facing Victoria's position at the head of the table. Every engineer, developer, and technical specialist sat uncomfortably in their seats, while Victoria reviewed documents with the theatrical precision of a prosecutor preparing for trial. Marcus Thompson stood near the windows, looking deeply troubled, flanked by two security guards whose presence transformed the morning meeting into something resembling a tribunal. "Thank you all for your punctuality," Victoria began, her voice carrying across the room with calculated authority. "Today, we address a critical obstacle to DataFlow's continued success and growth trajectory." Diana had positioned herself near the back corner, her laptop open, and her expression carefully neutral. But I caught her subtle nod toward Victoria's briefcase, where the corner of a manila folder protruded, with what looked like legal letterhead visible along its edge. Victoria's presentation began with slides attacking everything I had built over 5 years at DataFlow. She criticized my system designs as legacy architecture incompatible with modern scalability requirements. She questioned my vendor relationships as potentially compromised by a personal conflicts of interest. She characterized my technical decisions as resistance to necessary modernization initiatives. Pearl Martinez represents the old guard thinking that prevents DataFlow from achieving its full potential, Victoria declared, clicking to a slide titled Operational Efficiency Barriers. Her attachment to outdated methodologies has created dependencies that limit our strategic flexibility and increase our operational vulnerabilities. My colleagues' faces reflected a mixture of confusion and discomfort as Victoria systematically dismantled my reputation. James Wright, a junior developer I had mentored for 2 years, looked physically ill as Victoria suggested that my training methods had indoctrinated junior staff with obsolete problem-solving approaches. The attack continued for 15 minutes before Victoria delivered her verdict with the finality of a judge announcing a death sentence. Effective immediately, Pearl Martinez's employment with DataFlow Solutions is terminated. Her access to all systems will be revoked, and she will surrender her security credentials before leaving the premises today. The room fell silent, except for the barely audible hum of the building's ventilation system. Victoria's smile carried the satisfaction of someone who believed she had just solved a complex strategic problem with ruthless efficiency. But during her monologue, I had been conducting my own silent assessment of the situation. Diana's earlier signal had directed my attention to documents Victoria thought were secured in her briefcase. Among them, I could clearly see the tech giant corporation logo on what appeared to be a preliminary acquisition agreement. The revelation hit me like a physical blow to my chest. Victoria hadn't just been planning to fire me. She had been coordinating with tech giant's corporate development team to facilitate DataFlow's acquisition, and my termination was scheduled to occur immediately before the sale negotiations reached their final phase. "Hand over your security badge and access cards immediately," Victoria demanded, extending her palm toward me with the expectation of instant compliance. The security guards stepped forward, their reluctance evident in their slow movements and apologetic expressions. Marcus caught my eye and shook his head slightly, his gesture conveying both regret and helplessness in the face of Victoria's authority. But instead of compliance, I felt something unexpected rise within my chest. Not anger or fear, but a calm clarity that comes from finally understanding the complete scope of a problem you have been preparing to solve for months. My smile began as a slight upward movement at the corners of my mouth, growing gradually wider as Victoria's expectant expression shifted toward confusion. The room's tension transformed from uncomfortable anticipation into bewildered suspense as I maintained my composure in the face of professional annihilation. "You have exactly 5 minutes," I said, my voice carrying across the conference room with absolute certainty, "before the servers I personally own stop processing your transactions." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Victoria's confident posture wavered as she processed the implications of my statement, her mind clearly struggling to reconcile my calm demeanor with the gravity of her accusations. "What are you talking about?" Victoria demanded, her voice rising toward the edge of panic. "Security, escort this delusional woman out of the building immediately." But her laughter when it came sounded forced and hollow against the backdrop of my colleagues' stunned silence. The engineering team understood enough about DataFlow's infrastructure to recognize that my claim wasn't a desperate bluff from a terminated employee. Diana's laptop screen displayed the system monitoring dashboard that tracked DataFlow's server performance in real time. Green indicators showed normal operations across all critical systems, but anyone familiar with our infrastructure knew that normal operations depended entirely on services provided by Northwest Server Solutions. Marcus stepped closer to my position, his security experience recognizing the difference between empty threats and legitimate warnings. "Pearl," he said quietly, "what exactly are you telling us?" Victoria's briefcase contained more than preliminary acquisition agreements. During her presentation, additional documents had become visible, including what appeared to be technical specifications for migrating DataFlow's operations to tech giants' standardized infrastructure. She had been planning not just my termination, but the complete elimination of the systems I had spent years building and refining. The scope of Victoria's betrayal crystallized in that moment of confrontation. She hadn't brought me to this conference room for a performance review or even a straightforward termination. She had orchestrated a public humiliation designed to discredit me completely before transferring DataFlow's assets to her former employer. But Victoria had made a fundamental miscalculation in her strategic planning. She had assumed that destroying my reputation would automatically give her control over the infrastructure I had created. She had failed to investigate the legal and technical foundations of DataFlow's operational dependencies. My 5-minute warning wasn't a threat. It was a factual statement about the consequences of eliminating the person who had quietly become the most critical component of DataFlow's entire technical ecosystem. The walk from conference room A to my desk felt like traveling through an alternate reality where everything appeared normal, but fundamental rules had suddenly changed. My colleagues remained frozen in their chairs as Victoria's voice echoed behind me, alternating between authoritative commands and increasingly frantic demands for security intervention. But Marcus had subtly positioned himself between Victoria and the exit, his expression suggesting that he was beginning to understand the magnitude of what was unfolding. I settled into my chair with deliberate calm, opening my laptop while 2 security guards flanked my desk like bookends. Their discomfort was palpable as they realized they were being asked to supervise something far more complex than a routine termination. Diana approached under the pretense of retrieving files from her nearby workstation, but her real purpose was to provide me with intelligence that would prove crucial in the coming minutes. "Victoria left these on the printer," Diana whispered, sliding 3 sheets of paper beneath a stack of technical manuals on my desk. "I thought you might want to see them before security escorts you out." The documents Diana had secured were explosive, beyond anything I had anticipated. The first page contained email correspondence between Victoria and James Patterson, Tech Giant Corporation's Director of Strategic Acquisitions. The messages detailed a coordinated plan to acquire DataFlow's client base and proprietary algorithms while eliminating what Victoria described as redundant operational infrastructure. The second document outlined Tech Giant's timeline for dismantling DataFlow's existing systems and migrating all operations to their standardized platforms. The plan specified that client data would be transferred within 72 hours of acquisition completion, with no provisions for maintaining DataFlow's current service levels or security protocols. Most damning was the third page, which contained Victoria's assessment of DataFlow's key personnel. She had categorized every employee as either retention candidate or termination priority, with detailed explanations for each decision. My name topped the termination list, accompanied by a note that read, "Primary infrastructure architect must be eliminated before acquisition to prevent technical complications and potential legal challenges." While reviewing these documents, I executed the protocol I had hoped never to use. My laptop connected to Northwest Server Solutions administrative portal through an encrypted tunnel that bypassed DataFlow's corporate network entirely. With 3 keystrokes, I activated Protocol 7, the emergency shutdown sequence I had programmed 18 months earlier during a particularly paranoid weekend when I worried about exactly this scenario. Protocol 7 was designed to provide controlled degradation of services rather than immediate catastrophic failure. The first phase introduced minor delays into transaction processing, giving clients time to complete critical operations while making it clear that something was affecting system performance. Subsequent phases would gradually reduce functionality until complete shutdown occurred after exactly 5 hours of progressive warnings. Real-time monitoring displays throughout the office began showing subtle changes in performance metrics. Response times increased from 50 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds, still within acceptable parameters, but clearly trending in the wrong direction. Database queries that normally completed instantaneously now required several seconds, creating noticeable delays that would soon trigger automated alert systems. Victoria's voice carried from the conference room as she attempted to regain control of the situation she had initiated. "I want her computer seized immediately," she commanded. "Whatever she's doing to sabotage our systems needs to be stopped before she causes permanent damage." But Marcus had positioned himself directly behind my chair. His eyes focused on the monitoring screens that displayed the scope of my infrastructure control. As DataFlow's head of security, he understood the legal implications of seizing equipment owned by an external contractor without proper authorization. "Pearl," Marcus said quietly, "help me understand what we're looking at here. Are you telling us that DataFlow doesn't actually own its server infrastructure?" The question provided an opportunity to explain the relationship between DataFlow and Northwest Server Solutions without revealing my ownership of the external company. I opened my laptop's contract management system, displaying the legal agreements that govern DataFlow's technical operations. DataFlow has been outsourcing infrastructure management to Northwest Server Solutions for 2.5 years. I explained, indicating the relevant sections of our service contract. The vendor owns all hardware, maintains all security protocols, and guarantees performance standards through legally binding service-level agreements. Marcus studied the contract terms with growing comprehension of Victoria's strategic miscalculation. "So when Victoria terminated Pearl's employment," he said slowly, "she eliminated DataFlow's primary liaison with the contractor that manages our entire technical infrastructure." The first client complaints began arriving as our conversation continued. DataFlow's customer service team fielded calls from e-commerce clients whose payment processing systems were experiencing unusual delays. Financial services companies reported slower response times from applications that accessed DataFlow's databases for real-time transaction verification. Diana monitored the incoming support tickets while maintaining her position near my desk. Pearl, she said with carefully controlled urgency, we're getting reports from 17 different clients about performance issues. The pattern suggests systemic problems rather than isolated incidents. Victoria emerged from the conference room with her phone pressed against her ear, her earlier confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. She was clearly speaking with someone from Tech Giant's technical team, describing DataFlow's sudden infrastructure problems and requesting immediate assistance with system diagnosis. No, I don't know who their primary vendor is, Victoria said into her phone. The employee responsible for vendor management was just terminated, and she's apparently refusing to cooperate with the transition process. Her conversation revealed the fundamental flaw in Victoria's acquisition strategy. Tech Giant had been planning to absorb DataFlow's operations without conducting proper due diligence on the company's infrastructure dependencies. Victoria had assured her former colleagues that DataFlow's technical assets could be seamlessly integrated into Tech Giant's existing systems, but she had never investigated the legal and logistical foundations of those assets. My laptop displayed increasingly urgent alerts from Northwest Server Solutions' automated monitoring systems. Client applications were approaching timeout thresholds as server response times continued degrading according to Protocol 7's predetermined schedule. But the degradation remained within parameters that prevented data loss or security breaches, demonstrating the sophisticated planning that had gone into designing this safeguard. Victoria, I called across the office, my voice carrying easily over the growing chaos of ringing phones and worried conversations. You might want to reconsider your approach to this personnel transition. Northwest Server Solutions requires 48 hours advance notice for any changes to our primary contact relationships. The offer to negotiate represented my final attempt to resolve the situation through reasonable accommodation. But Victoria's response confirmed that she viewed this crisis as a temporary obstacle rather than evidence of a fundamentally flawed strategy. I don't negotiate with terminated employees, Victoria declared, her voice rising toward hysteria. Security, I want her removed from this building immediately, and I want her computer confiscated as evidence of corporate sabotage. Marcus stepped between Victoria and my workstation, his security training overriding his obligation to follow executive commands. Ma'am, he said with professional restraint, I need to consult with our legal department before seizing equipment that may belong to an external contractor. The liability issues could be substantial if we violate existing vendor agreements. But Victoria's desperation had reached a point where legal considerations couldn't compete with her immediate panic. She had spent months planning DataFlow's destruction, and my unexpected resistance threatened to expose her entire strategy to scrutiny that could derail Tech Giant's acquisition timeline. The countdown continued according to Protocol 7's inexorable logic, each passing minute, bringing DataFlow closer to complete operational collapse, while Victoria's frantic attempts to regain control only accelerated the crisis she had created through her own strategic arrogance. 2 hours after my departure from DataFlow's offices, Victoria Sterling's carefully orchestrated corporate acquisition had transformed into a full-scale operational catastrophe. I monitored the situation from my apartment in Capitol Hill, watching real-time performance metrics through Northwest Server Solutions' administrative interface, while news of DataFlow's crisis spread across Seattle's close-knit tech community. The first major system failure occurred at 11:30 a.m. when DataFlow's primary database cluster reached critical response thresholds. E-commerce platforms that processed thousands of transactions hourly began displaying timeout errors to frustrated customers attempting holiday purchases. Regional banks that relied on DataFlow's verification services found their loan approval systems frozen mid-application, creating customer service nightmares that would take weeks to resolve. Victoria's emergency response revealed the depth of her technical ignorance. She contacted 3 different IT consulting firms offering premium rates for immediate on-site assistance. But when the consultants arrived and attempted to assess DataFlow's infrastructure, they discovered that all critical systems resided on servers owned and configured by Northwest Server Solutions, making external troubleshooting impossible without administrative access that only I possessed. My phone began ringing at noon with increasingly desperate calls from Victoria herself. The first message was professionally hostile. Pearl, your childish sabotage of company systems constitutes criminal destruction of property. Contact me immediately to resolve this situation before I pursue legal action. The second call 30 minutes later carried a different tone. Pearl, I think we may have had some miscommunication about your role transition. Perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements that would benefit everyone involved. By 1 p.m., Victoria's messages had become openly pleading. Pearl clients are threatening to terminate their contracts. Please call me so we can find a reasonable solution to this problem. Diana forwarded me copies of internal communications that painted a devastating picture of DataFlow's rapid collapse. Customer service representatives fielded angry complaints from clients whose mission-critical applications had become unreliable. Sales team members watched potential deals evaporate as prospects questioned DataFlow's operational stability. Engineering staff sat helplessly at their workstations, unable to access the development environments they needed to address the mounting technical emergencies. The crisis reached a tipping point when Cascade Financial DataFlow's largest client threatened to invoke breach of contract clauses that would result in seven-figure penalty payments. Their transaction processing systems had experienced a 4-hour outage that cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue during peak trading hours. But Victoria's worst nightmare was yet to arrive. At 2:15 p.m., Diana called to inform me that federal agents had arrived at DataFlow's offices accompanied by someone I hadn't expected to see again so soon. Pearl, Diana whispered into her phone. Robert is here with 3 people who showed FBI credentials. They're asking to speak with Victoria privately, and she looks like she's about to faint. Robert Chen's return to DataFlow under federal escort represented the culmination of an investigation that had been developing parallel to Victoria's acquisition strategy. As Diana later explained, Robert had spent his forced retirement documenting evidence of Victoria's corporate espionage and maintaining contact with FBI agents who specialized in prosecuting anti-competitive business practices. The investigation had begun 6 months earlier when tech giants' aggressive acquisition patterns attracted attention from the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division. Federal investigators had been monitoring tech giants' communications for evidence of illegal market manipulation when they discovered Victoria's role in facilitating the systematic destruction of potential competitors. My server infrastructure had unknowingly become a treasure trove of evidence because Northwest Server Solutions security protocols automatically logged every data access file transfer and communication that passed through DataFlow's systems. When FBI agents requested cooperation with their investigation, I provided encrypted backups of server logs that documented Victoria's unauthorized sharing of proprietary information with tech giant executives. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Victoria had been copying client databases, sharing competitive intelligence, and coordinating acquisition strategies with her former employer for months before orchestrating Robert's removal. Her emails contained explicit discussions of plans to eliminate operational obstacles and streamline target acquisitions through strategic personnel management. Victoria's arrest occurred in DataFlow's lobby, while angry clients demanding explanations crowded the reception area. Federal agents read her Miranda rights as news crews filmed her perp walk through the same doors where she had entered 6 months earlier as an efficiency consultant. The charges included wire fraud, corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to violate federal antitrust laws. Tech giant executives faced simultaneous arrests in coordinated raids across 4 states as the investigation revealed a pattern of illegal acquisition practices spanning 3 years and dozens of targeted companies. But the immediate crisis at DataFlow continued despite Victoria's arrest. Client systems remained offline, financial losses mounted hourly, and the company faced potential bankruptcy if operations couldn't be restored quickly. The board held an emergency meeting at 4 p.m. to address the operational emergency and determine whether DataFlow could survive the damage Victoria had inflicted. Robert's first act as reinstated CEO was to call my phone personally. "Pearl," he said, his voice carrying exhaustion mixed with relief. "I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. But right now, I need your help to save this company and protect the livelihoods of everyone who depends on DataFlow's success." His request for assistance came with complete transparency about DataFlow's financial situation. The company had enough cash reserves to operate for 6 weeks under normal circumstances, but the crisis had accelerated expenses while eliminating revenue stream. Without immediate restoration of client services, DataFlow would face inevitable closure within 2 weeks. I had never intended for my defensive protocols to destroy the company I had helped build. Protocol 7 was designed to demonstrate my infrastructure's importance not to inflict permanent damage on innocent clients and colleagues. The time had come to shift from defensive posture to collaborative problem solving. "Robert," I replied, "I can restore limited services immediately to prevent data loss and protect client operations. But the long-term solution will require honest discussions about DataFlow's relationship with Northwest Server Solutions and my role in the company's future." The gradual restoration of DataFlow's systems began at 4:30 p.m. with the most critical client applications returning to normal operation first. But the crisis had revealed fundamental weaknesses in Victoria's understanding of modern technology companies, where infrastructure dependencies can make or break billion-dollar enterprises in a matter of hours. The FBI investigation would ultimately expose tech giants' illegal acquisition strategy and result in landmark antitrust penalties that reshaped competitive practices across the entire technology industry. But in that moment of restoration, my primary concern was ensuring that DataFlow's survival honored the vision that Robert and I had originally shared for building something meaningful and lasting. The weeks following Victoria Sterling's arrest transformed DataFlow Solutions from a company in crisis into a symbol of resilience that inspired our entire industry. Federal prosecutors built an airtight case against Victoria and her tech giant conspirators, using evidence that my server infrastructure had meticulously preserved without anyone realizing its significance. Every email Victoria had written, every file she had transferred, and every unauthorized access she had granted to external parties existed in encrypted logs that painted a devastating picture of corporate espionage. Victoria's trial became front-page news in the Seattle Times when prosecutors revealed the scope of tech giants' illegal acquisition strategy. The scheme involved identifying promising technology companies, placing corporate spies in executive positions, then systematically sabotaging operations to force distressed sales at below-market prices. DataFlow represented their most ambitious target, with projected client revenues exceeding $40 million annually. But the trial also revealed my unexpected role as an inadvertent whistleblower whose security protocols had captured evidence that law enforcement could never have obtained through traditional investigation methods. The Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity Division took particular interest in Northwest Server Solutions' logging capabilities, recognizing their potential applications for protecting critical national infrastructure. Robert's reinstatement as CEO came with unanimous board support and a renewed commitment to the innovative culture Victoria had tried to destroy. His first major decision involved offering me the position of Chief Technology Officer with a substantial equity stake and complete authority over DataFlow's technical strategy. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Victoria's attempt to eliminate my influence had ultimately resulted in my promotion to executive leadership. But success at DataFlow would have required abandoning the business I had built through years of careful planning and financial sacrifice. Northwest Server Solutions had grown beyond supporting just DataFlow into a legitimate cybersecurity company with government contracts and Fortune 500 clients. My decision to remain independent reflected not rejection of Robert's offer, but recognition that my true calling involved building something uniquely my own. The Department of Homeland Security's contract offer arrived 3 weeks after Victoria's conviction. Federal investigators had been impressed by my infrastructure's resilience under pressure and wanted Northwest Server Solutions to design security protocols for protecting election systems, power grids, and financial networks from cyber attacks. The 5-year contract guaranteed enough revenue to establish my company as a major player in the cybersecurity industry. Diana's promotion to DataFlow's Director of Operations represented one of the most satisfying developments in our story's resolution. Her loyalty during the crisis and her administrative excellence during the recovery convinced Robert that she deserved recognition as a key contributor to the company's survival. She accepted the promotion with characteristic grace, joking that she finally had authority to implement all the process improvements she had been suggesting for years. Marcus Thompson joined Northwest Server Solutions as our Director of Physical Security, bringing expertise in protecting server facilities and personnel that complemented our technical capabilities. His decision to leave DataFlow reflected his belief that my company's mission aligned more closely with his professional values than traditional corporate security work. Victoria's sentencing hearing provided closure that I hadn't realized I needed. Federal Judge Patricia Brennan delivered a stern rebuke of Victoria's actions before imposing a sentence of 5 years in federal prison plus $15 million in restitution to companies affected by tech giants' illegal acquisition scheme. Victoria's expression during sentencing revealed none of the arrogance that had defined her DataFlow tenure, replaced instead by resignation and regret that came too late to undo the damage she had caused. Tech giant corporation faced even more severe consequences as federal investigators uncovered evidence of similar schemes targeting companies across multiple industries. The Department of Justice imposed unprecedented antitrust penalties totaling $800 million, while regulatory requirements forced tech giant to divest several subsidiaries and submit to federal oversight of all future acquisitions. The media attention surrounding our story transformed me from an unknown systems administrator into an inadvertent spokesperson for ethical business practices in the technology industry. Speaking engagements and interview requests provided platforms to discuss the importance of infrastructure security, whistleblower protections, and the dangers of unchecked corporate consolidation. But the most meaningful recognition came from unexpected sources. The Electronic Frontier Foundation honored Northwest Server Solutions with their Pioneer Award for demonstrating how technical expertise combined with ethical principles can protect innovation from corporate predators. The National Society of Professional Engineers invited me to deliver their annual ethics lecture, acknowledging that my decision to document and preserve evidence had helped expose corruption that threatened fair competition. Robert's recovery of DataFlow proceeded more smoothly than anyone anticipated. Clients who had initially expressed concerns about operational stability became advocates for the company once they understood the circumstances of our crisis. Several major corporations specifically requested DataFlow's services because our experience with Victoria's sabotage demonstrated our resilience and commitment to client protection. The partnership between DataFlow and Northwest Server Solutions evolved into a model for how technology companies could maintain operational independence while benefiting from specialized security expertise. Our success attracted attention from business schools studying sustainable technology strategies and government agencies seeking examples of effective public-private cooperation. My personal growth through this experience surprised me more than any external recognition. 5 years earlier, I had accepted employment at DataFlow, hoping to build a stable career in an industry I loved. Victoria's betrayal forced me to discover strength and determination I hadn't known I possessed, teaching me that authentic security comes from being prepared to stand alone when necessary. The financial independence that Northwest Server Solutions provided allowed me to pursue projects based on their social value rather than immediate profitability. Our pro bono work with nonprofits, educational institutions, and civic organizations reflected my belief that technology should serve community needs rather than just corporate profits. Diana and I maintained our friendship despite working for different companies, meeting monthly for coffee to share stories about our respective challenges and successes. Her insights into DataFlow's continued growth provided perspective on how my former colleagues were adapting to the post-Victoria era, while my experiences building Northwest Server Solutions offered lessons she applied to improving DataFlow's operational efficiency. Marcus's transition to private sector security work revealed aspects of his personality that corporate employment had never allowed him to express. His enthusiasm for protecting cutting-edge research projects and his commitment to ethical security practices made him an ideal partner in building Northwest Server Solutions' reputation for integrity. Looking back on the crisis that changed everything, I realized that Victoria had inadvertently provided me with the greatest professional opportunity of my life. Her attempt to destroy my career forced me to activate defensive capabilities I might never have needed, otherwise demonstrating that preparation and principle could overcome even sophisticated corporate manipulation. 6 months after Victoria Sterling's arrest, I stood in the lobby of Northwest Server Solutions' new headquarters in downtown Seattle's Belltown district, watching contractors install our company logo on the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. 25 employees bustled through our modern office space, including several former DataFlow colleagues who had joined our mission to protect technology infrastructure from corporate predators and cyber attacks. The transformation from my secret side business into a recognized industry leader still felt surreal during quiet moments when I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The government contracts that began with Homeland Security had expanded to include the Department of Defense, the Federal Reserve, and 3 state election commissions seeking secure infrastructure for protecting democratic processes. Our annual revenue had grown to $12 million, with projections suggesting continued expansion as cybersecurity threats became increasingly sophisticated. But success had brought responsibilities I hadn't anticipated when I first registered Northwest Server Solutions under my maiden name. Leading a team of cybersecurity experts required different skills than managing server configurations, challenging me to develop communication and strategic planning abilities that complemented my technical expertise. The transition from solitary problem solver to collaborative leader had been difficult but ultimately rewarding as I learned to trust other people with responsibilities I had previously handled alone. Victoria's final court appearance occurred on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. Federal prosecutors had negotiated plea agreements with most tech giant executives, but Victoria had insisted on maintaining her innocence despite overwhelming evidence of her corporate espionage activities. Judge Brennan's final sentencing included 5 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets acquired through illegal activities, and lifetime prohibition from serving in executive roles at publicly traded companies. I attended Victoria's sentencing not from vindictiveness, but from a need to witness the completion of a story that had begun with her attempt to destroy my career. Watching federal marshals escort her from the courtroom provided closure to a chapter of my life that had taught me invaluable lessons about courage, preparation, and the importance of standing up for principles, even when the personal cost seems overwhelming. Tech giant corporations restructuring under federal oversight resulted in the most significant antitrust enforcement action in decades. The company paid $800 million in penalties, divested 12 subsidiary companies, and submitted to regulatory monitoring that would prevent future anti-competitive acquisition strategies. Industry analysts estimated that tech giants' illegal practices had suppressed innovation and eliminated competition worth billions of dollars over 3 years. The ripple effects of our story influenced legislation, protecting whistleblowers in the technology industry, and strengthened penalties for corporate espionage. Senator Maria Rodriguez from Washington state cited our experience during congressional hearings on updating antitrust laws for the digital economy, arguing that traditional enforcement mechanisms were inadequate for addressing modern corporate misconduct. DataFlow solutions flourished under Robert's renewed leadership, with quarterly revenues reaching record levels as clients appreciated the company's commitment to ethical business practices. Robert implemented new governance policies, requiring board approval for all senior executive hires and mandatory disclosure of potential conflicts of interest among leadership team members. The changes reflected lessons learned from Victoria's infiltration and demonstrated DataFlow's commitment to preventing future corporate espionage. Diana's success as Director of Operations exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. She implemented process improvements that reduced operational costs by 20% while improving client satisfaction scores across all service categories. Her promotion inspired other administrative professionals throughout the company, proving that operational excellence deserved recognition alongside technical innovation. Marcus's role as Director of Physical Security at Northwest Server Solutions had evolved beyond traditional facility protection into comprehensive risk assessment for clients facing sophisticated threats. His background in corporate security provided insights into vulnerabilities that purely technical approaches might overlook, making him an invaluable asset as we expanded our services to include executive protection and threat intelligence. My mentorship program for young women in technology had grown into a formal nonprofit organization that provided scholarships, internships, and career guidance to students from underrepresented backgrounds. The program's success reflected my belief that diversifying the technology industry would strengthen its ability to serve society's broad needs, rather than narrow corporate interests. Speaking engagements at universities and professional conferences provided opportunities to share lessons from my experience about the importance of ethical leadership in an industry that often prioritized rapid growth over social responsibility. Students consistently asked about balancing loyalty to employers with obligations to society, questions that had no simple answers but deserved thoughtful consideration. The personal growth I experienced during the crisis with Victoria had prepared me for challenges I couldn't have imagined when I first started working in technology. Building Northwest Server Solutions required not just technical expertise, but also skills in negotiation, strategic planning, and team leadership that I had developed through necessity rather than formal training. My apartment in Capitol Hill had been replaced by a house in the Magnolia neighborhood where I could walk to work along the waterfront while contemplating the unexpected direction my life had taken. The financial security that Northwest Server Solutions provided allowed me to pursue projects based on their social value rather than immediate profitability, fulfilling a sense of purpose that traditional employment had never offered. Diana and I maintained our friendship through monthly dinners where we discussed our respective companies' growth and the lessons we continued learning about leadership in rapidly changing industries. Her perspective on DataFlow's evolution provided valuable insights into how companies could recover from betrayal and build stronger cultures based on trust and transparency. Looking back on Victoria's attempt to eliminate me as obsolete, I realized that her assessment had been precisely backwards. She represented the obsolete thinking that viewed employees as expendable resources rather than valuable partners in creating something meaningful. Her focus on short-term financial extraction over long-term value creation reflected a mindset that was increasingly recognized as destructive to both business success and social progress. The deep life lesson that emerged from my experience was that authentic security, both personal and professional, comes from building systems based on integrity, preparation, and genuine relationships with people who share your values. Being called obsolete often means you're threatening someone's unethical agenda, and that threat should be embraced rather than feared. My greatest strength hadn't been my technical skills, though they were certainly important. It had been my willingness to do the right thing even when the personal cost seemed overwhelming, combined with the foresight to prepare for challenges that might never arise. Those qualities had transformed Victoria's attack into an opportunity that exceeded anything I could have achieved through conventional career advancement. The experience taught me that when you stand on solid ethical ground and prepare thoroughly for potential challenges, you become unshakable in ways that no external authority can diminish. That kind of strength doesn't come from position or title, but from the knowledge that your actions align with principles that transcend immediate self-interest. Northwest Server Solutions continued growing because our success was built on protecting clients rather than exploiting them, creating value rather than extracting it, and solving problems rather than creating them. Those principles attracted employees, clients, and partners who shared our commitment to using technology as a force for positive change rather than corporate domination. The satisfaction I felt watching our team work together to solve complex security challenges reminded me why I had originally fallen in love with technology. We were building something that mattered, protecting infrastructure that thousands of people depended on, and demonstrating that business success didn't require compromising ethical principles. Victoria Sterling had been wrong about many things, but her greatest error was believing that loyalty and integrity were weaknesses to be exploited rather than strengths to be cultivated. Her downfall proved that sustainable success requires building trust rather than destroying it, creating value rather than stealing it, and supporting people rather than betraying them. As I concluded this story, I wanted to ask you something that might help you reflect on your own experiences with workplace challenges and ethical dilemmas. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what was right felt dangerous or costly, but you knew it was the only choice that would let you live with yourself? How did you find the courage to act on your principles when the stakes felt overwhelming? I hope my story demonstrates that preparation, documentation, and ethical commitment can overcome even sophisticated attempts at professional destruction. Sometimes the qualities that make you a target are actually your greatest strengths, and sometimes being underestimated provides the strategic advantage you need to expose the truth and protect what matters most. Please take a moment to like this story if it resonated with your own experiences or taught you something valuable about navigating complex workplace dynamics. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength when faced with betrayal, injustice, and the choice between personal safety and doing what's right. Share this story with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for their principles, and let me know in the comments whether you've ever discovered that your greatest professional challenge became your most important opportunity for growth and positive change. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most difficult and transformative periods of my life. I wish you the courage to recognize your own strength when it's tested, the wisdom to prepare for challenges you hope never to face, and the satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful that reflects your deepest values and highest aspirations.